Hello everyone, I'm Paul, obviously Caroline, but yeah, I just want to talk a bit about Bijou Stories, which is a project we've set up to find alternative ways of collecting and sharing stories from the LGBTQ plus community. I started the project perhaps about 2 years ago because I realised that a lot of the histories of the queer community weren't being captured. In the past, they were often ignored, or people got rid of their sort of ephemera or history stories. So I was really struck recently when this project, the Rebel Dykes film, came out. I really liked the film because they used oral histories to create a really exciting film that combined animation with talking heads, and it was all based on the oral histories that the women had collected, remembering their time during the 80s when they were part of quite a radical group of lesbians who some may remember from the Beaverman Sits on a Lesbian scandal, which was when they invaded the BBC News, and I think Nicholas Witcher sat on one of them and tried kicking them or something. Another time they abseiled down the side of the House of Parliament. So they were an amazing sort of like active group of women. And they made a film, which some of you may have seen. And I was so inspired by it that I got in touch with them and said, could we make a podcast which would look at both the film and the making of the film and the histories that they were sharing. So, because I wanted to give a sort of a 360 perspective of the whole project they created. So we made a podcast with some of the filmmakers and some of the women who were involved at the beginning of the project, but also with the younger people who were seeing the film and going to the exhibition that was on in Kennington during last summer. Because one thing that struck me was that the archives that the women had collected, they shared them with the younger generation to make the film itself. So the young people were those that put on the exhibition and produced the film. And we got some great, this is a picture here of a couple of the women who were in the film. And this is when they did an introduction in this space here, talking about the film and the production of the podcast. And also how one of the women, King Frankie Sinatra, was saying that it really uncovered more about the production of the film as well as the actual history that she was remembering. So that was one of our ways that we were really interested in responding to a proper oral history. I say proper oral history because I don't think a lot of the work that I would do would count as oral history per se, in that it's not all going to be going straight to an archive. I'm more interested in the ways that we can encourage people to look at those archives by finding a point, an entrance point into them, finding something they might find interesting themselves that pulls them into an exploration of the archives. And so I carried on working with some of these women, and we did a tour of the National Maritime Museum, where we looked at some of the queer histories that could be found in the Maritime Museum. And it's just sort of one of the projects we've been doing to encourage engagement on a very community level. But we've also been going out with very family-friendly projects, sort of like this wig out, which is getting family groups to make cardboard wigs. And then it's mainly we've been working with a lot of same-sex families so that they can share stories with us while the kids are happily working with Laurie there to make these glamorous wigs, which they then all settle down and listen to a story. So we've had some glamorous storytellers to tell the stories, and we were delighted to be invited up to Trafalgar Square last year to do the project. And you can see Caroline is mother, the persona, as one of our storytellers. And the idea of the project, as I said, was very much about finding a really easy access point for people to start thinking about sharing their stories. Because not everybody immediately thinks, oh, I've got a story that's really valuable, I want to share it with everyone. It may be that when they're talking to you, they say, like, oh, and I did this, I did that, and that's when you can identify, like, wow, that's amazing, this is a great story, we need to sort of capture this. And so I think it's just looking at these ways of capturing, but also ways of sharing. Rather than, I mean, it's great that we've got these long oral histories and archives, but sometimes they are quite overwhelming to explore. I've been and looked at, tried to find some of they're very, I don't know where to start, I didn't really. I just looked in all the details and panicked. So we looked at ways of sharing stories, which was, in this case, we asked people to make a pennant based on sort of a protest pennants used by, often women would be involved in creating them. During, like, in the 80s, the miners' strike, there was a lot of these sort of like banners made, fabric banners. So we wanted people to share their stories through creating these. And so we worked with the Metro Mental Health Group, and they produced some of these banners, which we later displayed in the National Maritime Museum. And we're going to display them later this year again in a shop in Lewisham, which is great. Also looking forward to a project I want to do, we have looking at the history when you have like these pulp novels, and the language used, which is of course like very derogatory, and it's full of like shocking, wicked, wanton. So I wanted people to sort of look at these, but then reclaim them and tell their own stories by giving them their own strap lines, their own ideas. So we're going to start a project working with a youth group in New Cross, where we'll be looking at these and then trying to get people to tell their stories, even if it's just as a one-line story based on a photo of them, collaged into some striking, pulpy image. But it's a way of, again, just sort of giving you a précis of what their oral history story might be. So you could look at this cover and then be tempted in to find what the oral history of that person is. So that's the flyers we're going to be using for those young people and that project. So we're very much looking at how we can collect stories through very informal workshops. Once we've engaged people, we'll then look at creating a more formal oral history with them. Rosie, who created the podcast for Rebel Dykes, is going to be doing the oral history recording sessions with people. And we're doing a project here with Lewisham as part of Borough of Culture, which is looking at the gay pubs of Lewisham Borough in the 80s, 90s, which have now closed, most of them, because of regeneration, loss of interest in some cases. So we want to look at the stories of the communities that used to frequent those pubs and how they managed to support each other through some of the difficulties faced by the community in the 80s, 90s, both the main sort of like AIDS, Section 28, but also local histories, like one of the barmen in Lewisham, who was quite a well-known character, was actually in the Admiral Duncan bombing and was later murdered on the South Bank. So it had a massive impact on the community in Lewisham. So we want to ask people, how did they deal with that problem? I mean, some people may remember there was a serial killer in Lewisham who killed a gay person as part of killing the gay people. And then we want to look, how did people deal with those sort of problems when there's nowhere really those days to go and get support? So support was found in the bars and pubs. And so we're really interested in looking at that. And then that's part of the Borough of Culture. So in September, we hope to be able to take over a space in Lewisham Shopping Centre and turn it into a queer space for 2 weeks. And I've worked with Caroline quite a lot. She'll take note, she's a better speaker than me. And we first started working together a few years back, but we've been really interested in queering spaces, looking at how we can interpret art collections or art exhibitions. And here we are at the Tate Gallery. and this is where Caroline as Myrtle was overcome with the erotic power of Henry Moore, so I had to revive her. As you can see, she's there on the passed out on the floor. And here we are doing some other. I think we also did an exorcism of somebody, and we had a lot of fun. And the tape curator said she really enjoyed it, but she said she had never seen so many walkouts. So I was like, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, we don't know. So I'll pass over to Caroline, and you can tell me when you want the next slide.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks, Paul. We're sort of moving on to this event that we're going to hold in June that we'd really like to invite you to. So there are sort of two elements to this event that I've explored. So maybe if we can have the next slide. So I love chat show formats. They're a really good way of encouraging people to speak from a place of authenticity, speak their story, and sort of mix up audience speaking with the voices of experts from the community. It's a really great format. So I ran Loose Women with Sue Kreitzman for about 3 years at the Poetry Cafe in Covent Garden. And we took it on tour, and we took it to Selfridges when the launch of 50 Shades, the book 50 Shades of Grey, was being launched. So at Selfridges we did this sort of alternative 50 Shades where we sort of took this book apart, and it was really good fun, and it was for a queer audience, and it was very much about reclaiming voice. So we had a section in Loose Women called The Thing is the Thing, which was where anyone could bring up a thing and talk to that thing and have that thing sort of witnessed. So some of the stories were really quite dark, quite emotional, and some of the stories were really beautiful and celebratory. But everybody had a space in that room to say about their thing. So what helped was having a thing to speak to, whereas people weren't just getting up and speaking within a kind of conventional format, they were actually speaking to a kind of thing. So if you have the next slide, please. Another Loose Women. So we work with musicians and artists and all sorts of people. And then if you have the next. Animal Magic, which is the event that Paul and I are organising, it is within a chat show format. So it will be Paul and myself, and we'll invite experts we'll interview them. But then also we're inviting an audience to become an animal spirit. So basically, part of my work as a sort of character performer, or whatever you would like, is I become a kind of character. And I was commissioned by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds to come up with something around birds. They were expecting painting. I came up with a character which was Rita Grebe, which is an 8-foot great crested grebe, and took her to Edinburgh. And basically I had a workshop where people could come to this workshop and, through working with bird watchers, find out what kind of characteristics they might share with a bird. And the point was not to kind of locate your inner bird, although that was really good fun. It was the conversations that people were having. So particularly there was a conversation with a mother and a daughter about their kind of bird characteristics, about how they were different, and that felt quite significant. There were fathers coming in and discussing, having really great conversations with their kids. So it got everyone sort of talking about identity. And so the next slide, so that is Rita, this is what Paul and I are doing in June, and we would really like you to come to it. We will not be putting you on the spot at all, but we will be working with you in a really great way to find out what your spirit animal is. And if you would like then to share an inciting incident from your life, or a moment where you changed and you would like that to be witnessed, within your character persona of your animal, that would be fantastic. Over to Paul.
So again, it's, as you can see, we are very interested in stories and collecting the stories, but also we're really keen on taking it out to people so that we can reach out to new audiences, young people, anyone who may think like, oh, I haven't got a story to share. You know, we're really interested in capturing their stories because everyone's got a story to share, and that's what I think we really are trying to capture with these. People don't even know they're sharing stories with you sometimes. You just start chatting about stuff and they, oh, I remember so-and-so and this and that. And then you begin to find the narrative within that. Then we can like talk to them about whether they want to make it a more formal oral history, in which case I've worked with Rosie to create an oral history reflecting on the LGBT experience, and that would be something that we'd put in the archive. But our main focus is definitely on how do we share these stories in a really quick, punchy way. If we manage to get the funding properly for the exhibition in the Lewisham shop, we'll just create this space where we have workshops, but also project images from the oral histories collections and the Lewisham pubs. Perhaps try and find some performers from the time, the 80s, 90s, who will perform in the evening. We're also hoping to get some local gay bars involved to become resident bar or something in the Lewisham Centre, which is the height of glamour for everyone. So I mean, we'd love people to come along to Animal Magic to see how it works. It would give us a great way to pilot the experience, what we're trying to do as well.
And it's on the 10th of June.
10th of June.
And it's on at 6 o'clock, and it will be here.
Yes.
In the theatre. So you don't need to participate, you can just rock up and enjoy the refreshments and enjoy Paul and I doing this, but with these masks on or something slightly different. But if you want to kind of really locate your inner animal spirit, it would be wonderful to work with you and to have some fun. Yeah.